Welcome to A Guide to Every Deck in EDH. Today we're looking at Magda, Brazen, Outlaw. So Magda is a 2-mana 2/1 dwarf legend that says other dwarves you control get +1/0, but that's not important. The important part is the second and third ability. Whenever a dwarf you control becomes tapped, create a treasure token and sack 5 treasures, search your library for an artifact or dragon, put that card onto the battlefield, then shuffle. So obviously, this has combo written all over it, and that is what the deck is primarily trying to do. It is an all-in combo deck. So we're going to want either dwarves to tap, or we're going to want ways to tap Magda, especially if we can untap it and tap it again and again to make infinite treasures. And then we can sack the treasures to go find combo-based artifacts. So we're going to skip the combos for right now, and we're just going to focus on what the rest of the deck is doing, and then we'll get to the combos. So Fable the Mirror Breaker, this is fine just as a filtering effect, but the Kiki Jiki side of it can actually combo with things in the deck. More on that later. Jessica's Will as card draw / a ritual. Memory Jar as a artifact that we can go find that will draw a bunch of cards, as well as the One Ring. Skip over the combos. We've got counter spells in the Red Blasts and Tybalt's Trickery. Then we've got this section. I'll get back to this in a bit later. We've got some fast mana, Simian Spirit Guide, Rite of Flame, etc. A bunch of lands, which in this case is going to be mostly red and colorless utility lands. So we've got Ancient Tomb, City of Traders. We've got Mutavault. Mutavault is important as technically it becomes a dwarf. So if you animate it, it will become a dwarf. We've also got these lands that tap stuff. So Survivor's Encampment and Holdout Settlement, because tapping our dwarves produces treasure tokens. So these are relevant. We've also got Mycosynth Gardens, Great Furnace, Urza's Saga, and then Homeward Path as a way so that if Magda gets stolen, we can steal it back. We've got Shinka, Sokinzon, Emergent Zone as a way to go off at instant speed, and Command Beacon to get Magda back from the command zone in case it gets killed and then it's too costly to replay. A little bit of protection in Cavern of Souls and Deflecting Swat, some ramp in the form of all the typical ramp cards, but also Professional Facebreaker, which is good with all of our treasure synergies, along with Dockside and Cursed Mirror. Also Liquimetal Torque. And then we've got quote-unquote reanimate cards in Goblin Engineer and Goblin Welder, which we can use to switch around artifacts. Also Goblin Engineer is a tutor. Then we got a bunch of removal spells. So we do have the stuff you would normally expect, like Pyro and Red Blast, but we've got Abrade, Chaos Warp, and Wild Magic Surge. This deck is very vulnerable to effects like Null Rod, because we do need to, or like Curse Totem or whatever, so we do need ways of taking out stuff. We've got Twin Shot Sniper, Fury, Galvanic Blast, and Rending Volley, all as way, and then Blast Zone and Barbarian Ring, which deals 2 damage when we have Threshold. Then we've got a bunch of Stax effects, so Blood Moon, God Pharaoh Statue, Soulless Jailer and Soul Guide Lantern, Sphere of Resistance and Thorn of Amethyst, and Tangle Wire. And we, for the most part, can get around these. Like, obviously, Blood Moon is mostly asymmetrical because we're a mono-red deck. And then we can get around effects like Sphere of Resistance and Thorn of Amethyst because we can generate so much mana off of like all these treasure tokens that we're generating. Also, Tangle Wire is actually positive for us. Tangle Wire is fading 4, and at the beginning of each player's upkeep, that player taps an untapped artifact, creature, or land they control for each fade counter on Tangle Wire. So for our opponents, this is going to be their lands, their Mono Dorks, their Mono Rocks, but for us, we're going to tap our dwarves down and make treasure tokens. We've got Portal to Phyrexia as a sweeper / just big bomb artifact that we can go tutor up with Magda. We got Gamble as another tutor. Then we've got some of these things are kind of uncategorized. So what they do is Ashnod's Transmogrant is a 1-mana artifact that says tap, sack it, put a +1 counter on target non-creature artifact, and the creature becomes an artifact until it becomes an artifact creature permanently. Sting the Glinting Dagger, 2-mana equipment. Equipped creature is +1 in haste. Beginning of combat, untap equipped creature, and equipped creature has first strike as long as it's blocking or blocked by a goblin or orc and equipped to. So primarily what this does is it's a way to just allow you to untap Magda again during the turn. So you equip it to Magda, beginning of each combat, untap the equipped creature, or just any dwarf. So if you tap a dwarf, then this can equip to a dwarf, it untaps the dwarf in combat, and then you tap it again. And then Chisgoria Forge Tyrant, 9 mana, but it has affinity for artifacts, 5/4 flying haste. When it enters whenever it attacks, exile the top 5 cards of your library. You may cast an artifact spell from among them this turn. If you do, it has affinity for artifacts. So Magda doesn't just tutor for artifacts, it also tutors for dragons. So this is the only dragon in our deck. So this can go tutor up Chisgoria. So let's say maybe we have 5 treasures, but we don't have like the infinite treasures and we can't actually win with any combo. We can tutor up Chisgoria, and then Chisgoria can hopefully find us the artifact that we need to win. So then we've got this section, which I call Dwarves, Treasures, and Tappers. So this is cards that are either dwarves, or they make or interact with treasures, or they are tapping effects to tap our dwarves / Magda down in order to generate the treasures. So a lot of these cards are going to be just straight up dwarves that actually really just don't do anything other than just tap for treasure tokens when Magda's in play, but we'll go through them one at a time regardless. Adaptive Automaton, choose a creature type, it's that type, and then other creatures you control of the chosen type are +1, so it's basically a dwarf lord. Axguard Cavalry, 2/2 for 2, tap, target creature gains haste until end of turn. It's a dwarf that has a tap ability, so it can tap itself. It can also give another dwarf haste, so you can tap that dwarf immediately by attacking with it. Bloodfire Dwarf, 1 mana, 1/1, and sack itself, deal 1 damage to each creature without flying. Most of these abilities, again, are not going to really be too relevant a lot of the time. Clock of Omens, this is a combo card, we'll get back to that later. Clown Car, X mana, when it enters the battlefield, roll X 6-sided dice. For each odd result, create a 1/1 white clown robot creature token. For each even result, put a +1 counter on Clown Car and as crew 2. Again, this is another combo piece. We'll come back to this later. Dwarven Armorer, red 0/2, red tap, discard a card from your hand to put either a +0/+1 counter or +1/+0 counter on a target creature. Again, it's just a dwarf that has a tap ability. Dwarven Blood Boiler, red, 2/2, tap and untap dwarf you control, target creature gets +2/+0 until end of turn. A dwarf that can tap itself and all of your other dwarves. Dwarven Grunt, 1/1 with Mountain Walk. Not much more to say about that. Dwarven Scorcher, red 1/1, sack it, deal 1 damage to target creature unless the creature's controller has deal 2 damage to them. So this ability is basically irrelevant. Dwarven Trader, it's a 1/1, it has no abilities. Enslaved Dwarf, red 1/1, red, sack itself, target black creature gets +1/+0 and gains first strike until end of turn. Again, ability is totally irrelevant. It's just in here to be a 1 mana dwarf. Gimli of the Glittering Caves, 3 mana 1/1, double strike. Whenever another legendary creature enters the battlefield under your control, put a +1 counter on Gimli. And whenever Gimli deals combat damage to a player, create a treasure. Liberated Dwarf, red 1/1, red and sack, target green creature gets +1/0 and gains first strike. Metallic Mimic, as it enters, you choose a type. It's that type. Each other creature you control of the chosen type enters with a +1 counter on it. Again, it's just another adaptive automaton. It's a dwarf lord. Smuggler's Copter, whenever it attacks or blocks, you may draw a card. If you do, discard a card. But the primary reason for this and Unlicensed Hearse is that because they have crew and Clown Car as well, because these cards have crew, they are ways of allowing you to tap your dwarves at really no cost. Then we've got Springleaf Drum, Survivor's Encampment, and Holdout Settlement as, again, ways of tapping our dwarves down. Spark Mage, 1/1, dwarf for 1. Whenever it deals combat damage to a player, you may have it deal 1 damage to target creature that player controls. Again, basically just a 1 mana dwarf. And then finally, Zorn. If you would create 1 or more treasures, instead you create those treasures plus an additional treasure. So it just means that you create 2 treasures every time you make 1 treasure, which of course is great with Magda. So then we've got our combos. Academy Manufactor, if you would create a clue, food, or treasure, instead you create 1 of each. Technically not an infinite combo, but it does mean that every single time we make a treasure, we also make a clue, which can potentially then be transformed into ways of drawing more cards. So if we can create infinite treasures, we should be able to just win by using Magda to tutor stuff, but we can also just make infinite clues as well, and then use those to draw our deck. Then we of course have Grindstone plus Painter's Servant. So Painter's Servant, choose a color, Grindstone, mill an opponent until they, and then mill the whole deck out of our opponent basically when we have Painter's Servant in play. Do note, you should probably choose a color that's not blue so that our opponent cannot cast Force of Negation, Force of Will on anything. Also, we don't want Red Blast and Pyroblast to be able to counter or kill any of our stuff, although we can name blue if we want our Pyroblasts and Red Blasts to be able to kill opponent stuff. And then we've got Universal Automaton. So this is a changeling, so it's again a 1 mana dwarf, but it specifically goes infinite with Clock of Omens. So if you're familiar with the Magda deck in Modern, you should know how this combo works already, but basically you've got Clock of Omens plus Universal Automaton plus Magda. So you have Clock and Universal, so you go tap Clock, tap Universal Automaton, you target the Universal Automaton. So the Universal Automaton becomes tapped, triggering Magda to make a treasure. This then the clock ability resolves, untapping Universal Automaton. You now have an Automaton and a treasure in play. You activate clock, you tap Automaton and the treasure token, targeting Automaton. Automaton taps, triggering Magda to make an untapped treasure. Then the clock ability resolves, untapping Automaton. So you continue this looping over and over and over. You create infinite treasures, although all of those treasures are tapped, but it doesn't matter because Magda can then sack the treasures to go find other combo pieces. You can get Spine of Ishsaw if you need to find a removal spell that can kill something, but Spine of Ishsaw is also interesting in that it does two other things. So one, if you have any way to sack it, you then get it back in your hand and then you can replay it to potentially just blow up your opponent's stuff. So if you can make infinite treasures, let's say, and you have like some way to sack an artifact like a welder, you can then sack the spine, then recast the spine, blow something up, sack the spine, recast the spine, blow something up, etc. Cursed Mirror, it also has infinite ETB triggers, so it can blow itself up and then come back. So blow itself up, comes back to your hand, recast it, blow itself up, come back to your hand, recast it. Infinite ETB triggers if that's ever relevant. Sculpting Steel and Cursed Mirror are basically just copies of things that you can use to copy whatever you need. Maskwood Nexus, creatures you control are every creature type. The same is true for creature spells you control and creature cards you own that aren't on the battlefield. And it has 3 mana tap, create a blue shapeshifter creature, so all of your things become dwarves. Mirror of the Forebears. As it enters, you choose a creature type, and then 1 mana until end of turn, it becomes a copy of target creature you control of the chosen type, except it's an artifact in addition to its other types. So yet another copy effect with Cursed Mirror, Sculpting Steel, Mirror of the Forebears. You also have, and I should have included this here, so Liquimetal Torque, which is in our pile of ramp cards, but Torque and Liquimetal Coating, so anything that turns stuff into an artifact, so Torque Coating and Ashnod's Transmogrant, so anything that turns something into an artifact. So let's say we have one of those, and we have Magda and Clock of Omens. We can then do the same Clock of Omens combo as the Universal Automaton trick. So let's say we turn Magda into an artifact, then we use the exact same clock loop as we would with Automaton, except we use it with Magda, right? Or we can also use Clock with Academy Manufactor, right? It doesn't matter how we're doing this as long as we keep doing this over and over and over. So Clock can go off with any artifact creature, not just Automaton. It's just that Automaton's the cheapest one and happens to also be a dwarf because it's a changeling. So Clock plus Magda, or rather it goes off with dwarves specifically. So if we turn Magda or any of our other dwarves into an artifact and we have Magda in play, then we clock loop them the same way we would Automaton. So not Painters or Academy Rector, but Automaton or any dwarf that we turn into an artifact. We also have the clock loop of going off with Metallic Mimic and Adaptive Automaton, because again, they become dwarves and they're also artifacts, so that's relevant. Also, we can turn Mutavault into a creature that's also a dwarf, and then we can turn the Mutavault into an artifact if possible with using our artifact things, and that's another combo we can go that way. So okay, once we have the infinite treasures with Magda, we can then tutor up any artifacts we want in our deck, which can be any combos that we want. So specifically, we can go find Painter Grindstone to kill our opponents. We can also win on the spot because we can do things like get Painter Grindstone and then grab Cursed Mirror and Sculpting Steel to become copies of Grindstone and mill out our other opponents. So we don't have to do it just one at a time. We can just hit every player at once and kill them all. And there's other combos not pictured. Like there's obviously multiple ways to turn things into artifacts. So like Liquimetal Coating, for example, isn't in this deck, but it easily could be. Mycosynth Lattice would have the same effect, although it's more expensive. Although you could also combine that with Karn the Great Creator if you wanted to in this deck, although this version isn't playing it. There's other cards like Silver Skin Armor that turn things into artifacts. And there's also a bunch of other combo lines that are extremely, extremely complicated. So there are combo lines that involve grouping together an absolutely ridiculous amount of cards, although it's not too ridiculous when you have Magda to tutor up the remaining artifacts in the combos, but there's things like, okay, so here's a combo. So like, let's look at Magda combos, right? So some of these combos are like Magda plus Academy Manufactor plus Maskwood Nexus plus Cursed Mirror plus Sculpting Steel plus Elixir of Immortality plus Dwarven Scorcher plus Zorn plus Clown Car. Like, this is a crazy amount of things that you need to put together, but technically these do actually win the game. A bunch of this stuff together. And although some of them are artifacts that you can just tutor out with Magda, some of them are not, like Dwarven Scorcher, Zorn, And yeah, Dwarven Scorcher and Zorn are not artifacts to be tutored out. And I'm not going to go through this combo here. Like, it's so convoluted. You can pull up Commander Spellbook if you want to and go through it. But just note that there are multiple super convoluted combos. Although if you can find one of these combos, you can probably just find one of the easier combos to execute. So primarily the easiest one to go through is just like the Painter Servant combo. But obviously, there are more complicated ones that use Maxwood Nexus or Mirror the Forebears or whatever. So you do keep those in mind. So the main game plan is going to be getting Magda out as fast as possible because all the combos revolve around Magda. And then you don't necessarily have to go off immediately, but you do want ways to tap your dwarves down so that you can keep generating treasures. And then eventually you'll want to put together one of those combos. So probably your combo loop will start with, in all likelihood, Clock of Omens, like some way that's going to allow you to get infinite treasures. And then the Magda will just tutor out all the remaining combo pieces and win the game. So yep, that is Magda Brazen Outlaw.